is a workshop on mushroom cultivation, and specifically cultivating it through inoculating logs. And so we're going to, I'm just going to give you a little overview of mushroom cultivation, and so you'll have a sense for why we're doing what we're doing and what you might be able to do in the future. I'm Debbie Collins, and I belong to the San Francisco Mycological Society and have studied with Paul Stamets, who is one of the most exciting people in mushroom cultivation. Here's a couple of his books, Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms. I have a handout for you that has information pulled from here. And Mycelium Running is a really great one about very low-tech ways to get mushrooms growing in your garden. Now, we're doing logs today because it's one of the most foolproof. And a lot of the other procedures for growing mushrooms in your garden are a lot more experimental, and you hope that you're going to get them to grow if you do the right things, to say build a mother patch or something like that in your garden. But in that case, other mushrooms could be growing there as well, so you don't know exactly what you're going to be growing. But when you're inoculating the log, and a log that is still fresh, maybe has been cut at least 4 weeks prior to the inoculation, then you're pretty much sure that what's going to grow out of that log is the mushroom that you put into it. Yes?
You see lots of mushrooms after a rain. What's the best, other than after a rain, what's the best environment for natural occurring mushrooms?
This kind of weather right now in California, 2 weeks after a heavy rain, you'll start to see mushrooms popping up. So you get a heavy rain and then maybe some sunshine, and then the mushrooms that are already there growing under the ground will initiate, have been initiated by the rain and getting the moisture that it needs, and so then they'll pop up.
I mean, is there proclivity to grow maybe next to pine versus poplar versus buckeye?
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I wanted to begin with, is talk about there's about 4 categories of mushrooms right now that science is talking about. And one are called the saprophytic mushrooms, and that's what we're working with today. Mushrooms that break down dead organic matter. So all of the ones that we have here today are those saprophytes. Primary saprophytes are their food, their natural food is this wood, specifically oak, primarily around here, or other hardwoods. Some grow on conifers, but there are fewer species that grow on conifers. So that's the one category, and those are the ones that we mostly can cultivate. The other kinds that I'll talk about are less easy to cultivate, and so the other kind are parasitic mushrooms. We could cultivate parasitic mushrooms, and some people do, but a lot of times you don't want parasites starting if they're going to be ones that attack your trees and and eliminate them. So I think it's best to sort of keep away from the cultivation of the parasitic mushrooms. The other kind we talk about are mycorrhizal, and many of the wild collected mushrooms that you see in the gourmet stores, the matsutake, the Boletus edulis, the morel. All of these are mushrooms that are mycorrhizal. In other words, they grow in association with tree roots. And so they're there doing their part in nature, which is to be kind of a transfer of nutrient and moisture with the tree. So they have these beneficial relationships between the mushroom and the tree, where they bring nutrient and the tree brings something else. Can't remember right now. But so it's they're beneficial relationships. And so when those mushrooms show up around, specifically they're associated with specific trees. So the boletes, or porcini is another way you recognize the gourmet mushroom, they are associated with pines. So if you know or have found that particular species 1 year before, you can go back the same year and still find that species around that tree. So others are associated with oaks. So chanterelles are very popular around here. They're kind of a yellowy mushroom, and they're associated with oaks. And again, they're the mycorrhizal that are growing in association with oak roots. And when they fruit, then that means that they're ready to reproduce and spread their spores. You can gather them if you get them early and cook them and eat them. But it's much harder to cultivate those. Many people are experimenting by getting those mushrooms, making a slurry of the mushroom and then watering around a tree that's not already in a mycorrhizal relationship. And so they're attempting to create that relationship. But that's a little bit harder, and it's experimentation. So a much more solid and easy thing to do is something like we're doing today, is log cultivation that has been done for centuries. In Japan, of course, the shiitake mushroom has been cultivated for many, many hundreds of years in that fashion. So the saprophytic, the mycorrhizal, and also and the parasitic, and then there's the endophytic, and they're ones that are inside the root of a plant. And it's suggested that 90 plus plants have mushroom species associated with them, and probably more, and some have more than one species associated with them. So all of these that are the under the ground mycorrhizal and endophytic are much harder for us to know about or to cultivate. So that's why we want to talk about plugging today. Any questions so far?
What about truffles?
Truffles are, again, a mycorrhizal associate with certain kinds of trees. And people have been trying and trying to create that relationship. And maybe some are successful, but I haven't myself been involved in that. But
probably not. If they are, they're probably not telling.
Yeah, well, they're trying to figure it out so they can make the big bucks.
Do you know the trees that are associated?
I don't. No, I don't. Any other questions?
What about abalone mushroom? Have you seen them? The nice one.
The abalone mushroom?
Yeah. I saw that we bought some from the Monterey market, and then we matched it with the Chinese abalone sauce, and it's almost like abalone. You haven't had that?
I haven't, and I'm just trying to think. You know, a lot of common names. They have several common names.
Okay, I must let you guys try this.
Yeah, there's probably something
I didn't go
in
to the
here
Monterey market today.
we can look at that. Yeah.
Who eats mushroom besides humans? Pigs?
Well, of course, yeah, the pigs like the truffles, and
Do birds like them? I'm just thinking how they
birds?
spread their spores.
absolutely. It's a lot of species. You know, the bugs are nibbling on them. When you find them outside, and if it's been fruited for a while, like some in Gladys's backyard, you open it up and you'll see little holes through. There's worms and other creatures that are feeding on that the minute it comes up. And so, and birds especially will eat some of the mushrooms, and then they'll fly somewhere else, and maybe they'll survive the process through their body. But yes, it's everybody is involved in the process, and we help spread the spores by collecting the mushrooms and taking them somewhere else. They may be on our clothes or in our hat or on our shoes, and just by being where an open mushroom is, the spores, which are microscopic, could be on us or in the air, and it's spread by the wind. Yeah, I think a lot of times the language around mushrooms gets confused. People say, well, these are the spores. Well, this actually This white stuff that you see right here is the mycelium, and that is what we call the living body of the organism. That really is the organism. And when a mushroom species is in the ground, it could, Bill and I were talking about, it could spread several acres if undisturbed, because it's a mat that grows, and it's single cells that are this huge network of cells. So there's this communication among the whole organism. You know, if something happens on this end, there's kind of an intelligence that is transferred to the whole rest of the species. I myself have been involved in something called mycoremediation, and it's using these saprophytic mushrooms to break down hydrocarbons. So what we found is that this organism, when it comes in contact with something that, like a petroleum hydrocarbon, which is very similar to its natural food, wood, it creates enzymes, just like it's doing here, creating enzymes to digest this wood and take it into its body and break it down. Same thing goes if it comes in contact with petroleum or PCBs or dioxins, a lot of the chemicals that we created for our industrial processes that are now sort of stalling natural systems. What this mycelium does is create an enzyme that will break down that particular chemical, and that information is shared among the whole organism, it's thought. And it also, especially this oyster mushroom that it's the Pleurotus austriatus, this one is especially good at breaking down different things. So if it comes it grows on straw, it goes on oak, it grows on maple, it can grow on corn cobs, it grows on a lot of different things. You could grow on cardboard. So it's thought that it probably secretes an enzyme specific to each one of those different organisms. So there's a lot of intelligence that's part of this organism. It's a real connector in the natural system. You can see how with the mycorrhizal, it's connecting trees and connecting whole ecosystems. It connects this tree to that tree and to that shrub. So when soil is disturbed, a lot of these natural connections are also disturbed. So the saprophytic mushroom is a big degrader of material, and so we should be thankful to this species for decomposition, basically, for taking something that's died and breaking it down into elements so it recombines and becomes soil. So they're very important species, as is each species, but this one is a real connector.
So all oyster mushroom belongs to that family?
All oyster mushrooms are saprophytic, or feed on dead organic material.
I see.
And so most of these that we are cultivating grow on hardwoods, and so that's why we had to bring oak and whatever else you could find that's a hardwood locally. It could be maple.
Any softwood?
Not necessarily, but we did bring one species, the phoenix oyster it's called, or Pleurotus pulmonarius. It grows more on conifers. So there's some Monterey pine down the hill that Gladys wanted to try to inoculate. So this is one of the species that grows on conifers. So we're keeping this separate. Don't put that in any of your oak logs.
But we couldn't figure out the extension cord how to get down to the hill.
Right.
So here's, you, Bill, you can't help us figure it out.
My yard, I cut down 8 huge pine trees. And I really like to get rid of the roots. Would that help?
Yes.
Inoculating them?
Yes. And the fun thing about inoculating a stump, and I'll show you a little picture of how we might do that. In a stump, we again would we would try to drill in between the bark and the heartwood. So in this layer right here, just inside the bark, and then again 4 inches, and so that we do that on the top of the stump. And the cool thing about that is that the stump is already connected, its roots are connected into the ground and can still be feeding moisture to that species. And so over time, you're breaking down your root, your stump, and you're creating a food source for yourself. So anytime that...
Does it have to be in shade?
It helps if it's in a shady situation, and we have a lot of different weather here, you know, there's a lot of the time when it's going to be... Yeah,
Lots of space.
you could create a little shade over it if you were...
Have an umbrella over it.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yes.
Yeah, build a gazebo.
Are there medicinal properties besides psychotropic properties in mushrooms?
Absolutely. Almost all of the mushrooms are immune supporters. And then others have specific qualities that are being researched. For example, one of my favorite is the lion's mane, or Hericium erinaceus. You might have seen this. It's a tube fungus, so it looks like icicles, basically. And this, there's been research to show that it actually helps regrow neurons. And I was at a workshop where they used the dried lion's mane in soup at a nursing home, and found that it actually helped regrow some brain cells. So we're all into that possibility, especially at this age. You know, how can we? Yes, just don't eat them all.
And it's called lion's mane?
Lion's mane, or Hericium erinaceus. And there's also, Bill, Hericium abiatus that grows on conifers. So it might be worth it. I have a catalog here. It might be worth trying to inoculate some of your stumps with that variety. So I just want to go over the general process, and if questions come up while you're doing this, then you can, we'll fill you in, but just to get an overview of the process. First we're doing the plugging, and I'll have some sheets here that you can refer back to. But basically, we're going to drill the logs using the 5/16" drill bit. And we're going to drill 2 inches deep. And we want to basically have the holes all the way around the log and have them 4 in a diamond pattern, 4 inches apart. So if you do one here, then your next 2 will be in this diamond pattern to cover as much surface as you can as you go around the log. Yeah, you'll just be estimating. Each, like a log as big as the biggest one over here could take maybe even 50 plugs, but we'll try to have a few that are highly inoculated, and maybe others could be a little less inoculated. And then the next thing we'll do, once we've drilled the holes, and as I was saying earlier, we want to have only 1 species per log, because that species is the one that's going to be the primary decomposer of that log. We don't want competing species in there, but each one has their own species. And what else was I going to say?
The drill bits. Can you show the 2 drill bits? The one this one is from bigger.
Yeah. This is 5/16. We also, the other one we have, Bill, can you show us?
The wood bit's a little...
One that's more specifically for wood. I don't know what this is for. But anyway, why didn't we want this kind?
Somebody else brought those.
Okay, so this is the kind, this is a 3/8, and this, oh, this says 1/2.
Well, the 5/16
The
I have in
5/16
there
is already in. So
The half's
anything
okay.
in this general range, 5/16 is proportioned for the dowel, but you know, with either one of these, it'll also make a hole that will fit the dowel. So this one is specifically for wood. And we're using electric corded drills because anytime we've tried to do it with one of the Makitas or battery operated drills, there's just not enough power to go through the wood. So we're suggesting you use the corded drill.
And then the bits, the one that has circular ones, you said the sawdust will be left inside. You have
Yeah,
to,
those you have to actually work the drill bit back and forth, or at least the sawdust inside.
So if you're using
The
this
wood bit's
kind,
kinda
then
clean.
you kind of bring it in and out and maybe shaking out so the sawdust comes out.
okay.
So once we have it completely drilled, and we might do, maybe if you're doing one species, say start with 2 logs maybe, or 3 that you want to get completely drilled. And then the next process would be to, this is clean and filtered water. We don't want any chloramine water in this original hole. So you could just put a spritz of water in each hole to give it the moisture that will help sustain it, you know, before you set it out at home and hose it down.
Is distilled water?
No, we don't want to use distilled water. This is just, this is run through my filter at home, so it's like city water, but the chloramines have been filtered out because not really sure yet what chloramines do with the mushroom, but we're suggesting that since it does kill fish and things like that, we want to create an optimal condition. So I'm using,
So regular carbon filter would be appropriate?
yeah, yeah.
What about collecting rainwater?
Rainwater would be lovely, and I'm gonna, yeah, talk about that later as far as when we go to initiate our log. So when we work with the dowels, these have been produced in a sterile laboratory, and basically some of this mycelial tissue has been put on a petri dish and it grows out, and then that petri dish has been used to inoculate sterile grain, and then it grows through that, and then that grain is then used to inoculate these wooden dowels. And the dowels have that, you know, that little circular cut through them, so that really is a place for the mycelium to hold on to. So all of these are growing through with this tissue of the mushroom organism that's on the label here. So we want to, when we open it, we're going to be either and or wearing the gloves and maybe then cleaning our hands with a little alcohol, because we want to keep clean our work. We want to make sure that this doesn't get contaminated in between usages, and we make sure that shiitake and lion's mane tissue don't get mixed up on our hands and, you know, trying to confuse that log or confuse, you know, make a battle of the species. We don't want that to happen. So we're just kind of keeping it clean in between. So do your 2 or 3 logs, clean your hands, fill your holes with the dowel, so the 2-inch, what do we do with the,
Get a rubber mallet. Talk about it.
also the thing we didn't think of until too late, but Gladys had the chopsticks, is that you have that rubber mallet that we could hit it with, but you could also, just to make sure it's in your hole, just tap it in a little bit more with the chopstick, and you could even clean the chopstick off with a little alcohol if you
You want
want.
it like a 1/4 inch below the wood level, so through the bark and then like a 1/4 inch below that.
Yeah, it sort of sunk in. Now, if we just left it like that, all kind of organisms, ants and things would come and say, yum, yum, this is great, we're going to eat this up. So we don't want to do that. We're going to be melting, this is beeswax, and you can use beeswax or cheese wax or probably paraffin as well, but the beeswax is what they sell. at the Fungi Perfecti. We're going to melt this down, and we have little pitchers that you can fill, and that's one thing we've got maybe is the hot pads, and maybe we can get that, borrow some from you before we,
I have one in the stove.
yeah, we start, is that pour hot wax in here, and then use this pitcher to just fill that end. And so go around each one of your holes. So we'll be heating this up, and whenever wax is very flammable, so maybe Bill will be guarding this, or we'll make sure we don't spill that, and that you don't get it on you. So we'll try to get some more hot pads out here that you can hold this with, so you won't burn yourself.
You do not want to use just regular old candles and melt them, but they dry out and crack open when they're out in the weather. So use paraffin or
Yeah,
rub.
this is more pliable and good suggestion of what to do. So that would be the plugging. And so, and then once we've done Gladys's logs, what we can do is take them out and show how we will incubate them. That would be the next step. Now, it will take 6 months to a year for that mycelium to grow through these logs, and it's longer depending upon the size of the log. So what we want to do is be able to stack those up in a shady area, and we're going to get them off the ground. She has some birch logs that we're going to use. You could use pallets or other logs or concrete blocks just to sit them up off of the ground. Because what would happen if they're sitting on the ground? You have anybody decompose? They would decompose, and they would do that because there's
Microorganisms that are
Cross
yeah,
contamination.
the microorganisms that are already in the soil, that's what they do too. There's other fungi. So we want to make it specific to what we're trying to cultivate here. So we're going to lift it off the ground for this period. And we're going to have it out in a shady area, and we're going to water it. Let's see, incubation. Basically, we're going to water it 1 to 2 times a week if it's not raining. Now, in this rainy season, we'll probably just hopefully let nature do its course. Now, if we have a long dry spell, you might want to use the hose to wet your logs down. And ideally, we start this process later in the winter when we're not thinking there'll be other freezes. But these days, we really don't know anymore. And these logs were ready, so this was a good time for us to do it. But it's suggested that it be a little that we don't have a freeze, because the freeze could kill the mycelium. But if they're covered and in a protected area and they're already down inside that log, it may be less likely that they'll freeze. Okay. So once we've stacked Gladys's logs, or you've stacked yours at home in this shady area up off the ground, then you want to tarp it in some way. But you don't want to use plastic, but you might use a burlap, as what we're going to do with Gladys's, or some kind of shade cloth. And then we're going to just put something that keeps that about 2 inches off the top of the logs, so there's air circulation. So we'll have to remember to maybe save some of the birch for on top, so it can just kind of lay over rather than drag. You don't want to use plastic because you're more likely to get moldy.
The burlap is to keep other spores off the log?
I think to kind of keep other spores off. Of course, it could get the burlap going, but to keep moisture in, to keep it shaded. It's kind of a moisture, light, and protection, all of those things going on. Okay. So then, once it's incubated, 6, 9, probably a year, probably this time next year, is when you'll be looking out for some fruiting of your logs. And it could be 2 years if it's a fat log. So this is a long-term process in the logs. But again, you might get mushrooms off it for 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the size of the log. So then, if we think that the log is fully colonnaded, and by that it means that the mycelium has grown all the way through that log, and you could see maybe the end of the, you could see growth patterns on the end of the log, or you might be able to pull up a little bit of the bark and see white under there. So if you think it's fully colonnaded, then you want to initiate your crop. And we'll do that to initiate the crop when you think it's fully colonnading. We could soak the logs for about 24 hours. And if you've collected rain, you could be soaking it in barrels that is pure rainwater. And do that for 24 hours. And if not, you could use a sprinkler. And of course that water is going to have some chloramines in it, but that's what we have. So, and you might do that 2 to 3 times a week. So your more moisture is what you're using to initiate. And in nature, what happens is the rains come and the mushrooms come out. So your crop is basically, nature is in charge of it. However dense your log is, however appropriate your temperature is, and your moisture, the moisture that's happening that season, or the moisture that you provide because it's not coming in that season, then that's what will make your mushrooms fruit. So after initiation, it should fruit within 2 to 3 weeks, and then you could collect, and you want to make sure that it's the species that you blended it with. So you might be looking at
your
pictures.
phone number?
Yeah, but I would suggest you start looking at pictures of that species, and so you'll be convinced. And if you're not convinced, then you do need to bring in an expert or take some of that first fruiting to the Mycological Society meeting and have it identified by experts. But we are mostly sure there's going to be that species when we've inoculated it fully, a fresh log. We're not using logs that have been laying on the ground for over a year, because they're already have been inoculated naturally by some species who's breaking it down. So that's why we optimize the process for the species that we're trying to grow by knowing where the logs came from and how long ago they were cut.
Is it better to have bark on the host log?
Absolutely. Okay, so say it's a good species and it's fruited and it's fully identified, and you have your first crop and you eat them, and you maybe just eat a little bit to start out with, and always cook these mushrooms, please. Always cook your mushrooms, because it helps break down the cell walls and makes it more digestible. And plus any other organisms that might be there, we've also killed off anything that might be in it. So after you've enjoyed your first mushroom crop, you could wait about 2 weeks and then reinitiate. So you might soak them all again and bring them out and wait another 2 weeks. And you could have 4 to 6 fruitings within a year, conceivably. So that is pretty much the process.
So do mushrooms recognize the seasons, or can you trick them with a lot of water into going more often?
Mushrooms definitely recognize the seasons. They function under a certain time and temperature and moisture set of parameters. And what I've done is to put together sort of a general sheet for you about the different species. So I have the common name, the scientific name, what we're calling the spawn run. In other words, this is the incubation time. when it's running through, that mushroom mycelium is running through and eating that, colonizing that log. And it, I have 2 logs taking 6 months to a year, and if it's in a different substrate, if it's in wood chips or something like that, then it's a much shorter and more controllable process. And usually that's done, still that's done within the temperature and moisture parameters of that species. So oftentimes you have to, if you don't have a temperature controlled greenhouse, so to speak, you are depending on the season to do it. But the way that we have mushrooms in the stores available any time of the year is because someone has created the artificial environment that mimics the natural process. So, for example, oysters, the spawn run is about 75 degrees. So these will really start growing when it gets a little bit warmer. It wants to grow through at 75. And so we can create that kind of microclimate even in the summer out here in Lafayette, Walnut Creek, if we have it in a shady area. So then the initiation time temperature is more 50 to 60 degrees. So when the weather starts getting cooler, that cues that species to start setting up its primordia, or the baby mushrooms. Okay, and then the fruiting body of the oyster comes more at 60 to 70 degrees. So I have these to hand out to everybody, so you can refer back to this to have an understanding of what's happening with your particular species. So let's see, the Hericium erinaceus, the lion's mane, grows in fruits in a little bit warmer time. So it might fruit later than the oyster or the shiitake. Here's the growth parameters of the species that we have today, and I have the 2 references listed here from Paul Stamets, Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms, and Mycelium Running, which are the more low-tech ways to do things in your garden. A lot of good information there. So on the other side is just kind of a summary of the plugging, incubation, and initiation of the crop. So you'll have that as a reference if you're wondering, why is this taking so long, or what's going to make this work? It's here's that information. Another handout I have for you is something from the Mycelium Running book, and it's called List of Suitable Tree Species for the Cultivation of Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms. So pretty much these 3 pages are a variety of species that have been known to grow these saprophytic mushrooms that were. So there were a lot of questions before the workshop about, will it grow on this, will it grow on that, and these are the ones that they know certain ones grow on, and the others are, it might be an experiment. Okay. And another thing on the back is species known to regrow from stem buds. Now, if you can think of just like one of the mushrooms that might be in the backyard, certain species, if you cut off the bottom of that mushroom, you can plant it in similar substrate. Say if you had wood chips, if that is growing out of wood chips, you can cut that stem bud out and plant it in another area of that same kind of wood chips, whether it grows on oak or mixed hardwoods or just mixed species. And then you can get that will grow, because basically all of that fruiting body that we know of as the mushroom is basically condensed mycelium. So that stem bud actually has a little bit root-like character to it. It's basically threads of mycelium that will also take off and grow if it's in a moist environment with the species that it likes to grow in. So those are, be sure and take home this information that will sort of support your learning over time. So, any questions for this little process for people are raring to get going? Okay, we're going to be using tools, electrical tools with sharp ends and cords, and also we really ask that you be aware of where your body is, and that your fingers and your toes are all safe, and just working at a pace that's comfortable for you, where you don't hurt yourself. And any questions that come up, Bill and I are here to help you with that. So
Why don't we have everybody like drill 3 logs all the way around? You can kind of get everybody started, and once everybody's on the way about drilling, then I can fire up the stove and start mounting the wax. And then once we do the whole thing, then we can just turn everybody loose to
do what they
work on their, so we can kind of get everybody on the same page and together. And so we got an outlet here, an outlet there. I got a power cord. We can get 2 people back here. We got a couple other drills.
Now, does everybody have a drill, or who needs a drill?
There's 2 more drills here.
Yeah, we got 2 more drills over there, right? Yeah, 5 others.
Are you going to drill today, or just here for
I
that?
can drill today, and I can go get one if we need one.
Okay.
It's not far.
Anna's my neighbor.
And Julie brought these, which is, split oak, which oak is a wonderful tree, for growing, and we're going to try to do this anyway. Normally, we're using the logs that are intact, where the bark is already all the way around, and it's kind of this, it's already this little unit that's protected and grow through. So we're going to experiment with this, and we'll start with going through the bark, but at the same time, conceivably she could do a few on the sides. But like I say, it'll be an experiment.
I'll do some with holes on the side and some without, and then I'll just document when they start to sprout, and just take note.
So when you drill through the bark, make sure your drill plug actually goes below the bark. So you have enough when you put the block in. So it's like actually the 2 inches from here.
And so it's not just coming
when
out
you
the
put the
side,
plug in,
right?
you want to tap
So
it
my
down
diamonds might be
through the
the
bark
right
level.
Mm-hmm.
Right, don't put the wax in.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get
Begin.
going. Bill's using the spritzer and some clean filtered water to put a little moisture in each hole.
Oh, okay.
Just give that dowel, myceliated dowel, something to begin chewing on, and it likes the moist environment. So that's the next step after drilling all the holes in a diamond pattern on the log. What's your name again?
Anna.
Anna is going to demonstrate. She's put the gloves on, and she's cleaning off the gloves with a little rubbing alcohol. And what species did you want to begin with?
Oh, I need the neurons, but I'm going to go with the shiitake.
Okay. So that's
The neurons is what? Lion's mane.
the shiitake. So, and your log is where?
Right here.
Okay. So, since this has been created in a sterile environment, we're trying to keep it sterile and clean. by Anna cleaning her hands. So you can go ahead and open that and
Reminds me of the operating room.
yes, species in a log. So she's going to put
Do I just?
one dowel per hole,
Those are just gonna slide in.
and it looks like we had big holes there, so they just
It's gonna go
drop
right
in.
They're gonna be tighter on these other ones.
Now, it may be good for us to go ahead and do the wax on the ones on this side, so these don't fall out.
Right. Yeah,
So
they're definitely.
Bill has heated up
Okay.
the beeswax, and
So I'll do everything.
So that hot wax doesn't destroy the spores because of the heat?
well, a little bit, but the whole rest of the dowel is living and mycelium. The one end might be affected slightly, but I think it'll recover. And so,
Okay, I think I've done the upstairs.
yeah, so maybe we'll just do the one side. You can go ahead and take your gloves off, and you might, because as we were thinking that, well, it'd just fall out because some of the holes are kind of big on hers, so they just fall out if we turned it over. So, but other ones that have a smaller hole, you could probably get the dowels all the way around. So,
You need the hole to be deep enough to enclose the whole thing?
yes, so we're doing it about 2 inches, and this is about 1 inch, so it's about twice as long. So go ahead and take your gloves off, I think, because we'll save, we don't want to get hot wax on our self with gloves on. We'll take, so she's going to just pour.
How much?
We'll just fill up that hole, basically.
I'll just bang it, I'll just tilt it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that's
So does it make sense to cool it down before you pour it in?
Well, not really, because you need to have it liquid so it'll pour. So just as she's doing, I'll get a little wax on your driveway, but
It'll peel off.
it'll peel off.
It'll preserve it.
Amy, this is like advanced Montessori.
That's what it's hard. I'm learning about life. Reggio Emilia, too.
So anybody have questions about this particular process? And feel like you can go ahead and select the species that you want to work with and put your gloves on, clean your hands, and get going. Just beginning the wetting process. The rain for today is over, and we don't know when it's going to rain again, so we're just getting them moist. Because we'll be, during the year, watering once or twice a week, depending upon if it's rained or not. If it rains, well, of course, we're not going to water. If it rains twice a week, it's covered. But if it's a dry and hot season, we want to water them once or twice a week to keep, because mushrooms are 70% moisture. So we got to keep the moisture factor happening. And so it'll be taken care of during the winter.
And then when we want the mushrooms to start sprouting, we then soak it in water for 24 hours?
Right, and ideally you could capture rainwater in a bucket or in a rain barrel and use that water to soak each log over 24 hours.
How about the really long logs, like the huge?
Right, well, you could just one end and then the other in a rain barrel, or you could use a sprinkler or a hose
and just
to
hose
do
it.
the same thing.
How much do we have to hose it then?
Say if you're hosing it, you would probably do it 2 or 3 times a week during that initiation process for about 5 minutes. And we talked about using rain barrels to capture water off of the roof to possibly water, because many of the rain barrels have a hose bib on the bottom, and if you set them up far enough on some blocks, then there'll be a natural gravity flow where you could bring a hose here from wherever that rain barrel is and use that rainwater to water these. And of course the rainwater doesn't have the chloramines that are in our municipal water supply.
And chloramines are harmful to the mushroom growth?
And chloramines are actually harmful to fish, and we're still, we know we don't want to put chlorine on the mushrooms because that would kill them. But the chloramines we're still learning about. But if it is a long-lasting chlorine product that disinfects our water, but at the same time it could retard or the growth of the mushrooms or even kill the mushroom.
Okay.
So ideal would be able to water with rainwater. And you have a steel roof here, which is one of the better surfaces for collecting rainwater. The fruiting cycle could last maybe through the temperature range, 50 to 60 degrees, could last for a couple months actually in the winter. And in between times there'll be, once you've had your first harvest, then you may wait 2 weeks and to actually, or up to 6 weeks, to let it go dormant and then reinitiate it by that whole watering cycle, soaking and then or watering 2 or 3 times a week, and hopefully get your next crop.
And so what are they doing right now with this burlap sack here?
Burlap is a natural shade. So mushrooms love a woven pattern, so over time that'll probably grow the mushrooms. But right now this is shade, creating a little microclimate here for
a little tent here?
A little tent.
For
we might have put a couple inches. Yeah, it might be a little high.
Wonder why nail something lower if you want.
Yeah, we could nail something lower or put some wire.
Some of these things have the lower, whatever.
Do you have a hammer and nails you could put one lower?
That would be great.
I have hammer.
So basically,
just right above the logs there.
We're shading them out, and they'll keep the keep the sun out and keep the moisture in, basically.
And then eventually mushrooms might.
It's possible that the mushrooms would grow on there, but since we do have 3 different species, then who knows what's going to grow on there. But left alone, burlap bag is a wonderful way to grow mushrooms because the mycelium just loves to run out that woven pattern. So you could put wood chips, wet wood chips of oak in a mushroom in a bag of burlap and put in some of these dowels and wet that thoroughly, and that would grow out, and then also use the burlap as a surface for the mycelium to grow out.
Okay. I saw in your book that there's also some ropes you can use to grow some mycelium.
You can actually inoculate a degradable rope, not plastic rope, but something that's hemp. It has to be sterilized basically, and then inoculated probably with grain and then grown through. And that rope is then used to girdle a stump, or you could use a chainsaw to take the bark off. And if you wrap that around the stump, that's another way to inoculate that stump.
That's neat.
I will try it. Oh, that's right.
These are very French corners.
Does that work?
Oh, now more water?
More water.
So how many more days do you have?
Let me see, what's 6 months? 179 days.
Put a few dowels in there and wet the sawdust and see if that grows more quickly. That might happen in a month. Ideally, we might want to sterilize or pasteurize the wood chips.
Yeah.
Which would be just putting them in a big pot of water and bringing it up to 190 degrees and letting it stay there for an hour, and then draining it and cooling it, and then putting it in your burlap with one species of dowels in there, and then just sticking out here on top of your pile.
Oh, okay.
And it could fruit even this year.
Yay.
That would be faster.
Yeah.
The best way would be to pasteurize them, to be able to put them in a pot of water and bring them up to 190 degrees and keep it there for an hour, and then drain it and cool it. And if you kept a few of the dowels of, say, the oyster, and then put those in here.
Tell Bill, because he has all the dowels now.
Right. So why don't you get a few of the oyster dowels, and if you have a big pot that you could put that in, and like if you have a candy thermometer, you can put this in, fill it up with water, filtered water best if you have it.
If not rainwater.
If not rainwater, and then bring it up to 90 degrees. And if you have like a candy thermometer, you can hold it, turn it down so it pretty much stays 190 degrees for an hour. Then that's the pasteurization process. And you want to drain it and cool it, thoroughly cool it. But then if you fill this bag with that and then take 6 to 8 of those dowels, maybe even less.
Okay, let's go talk to Bill whether he wants to do it or not do it. Here's the equipment.
Yeah.
I got the goods, let's put it this way.
Yeah. Eater.
This is not a female job, I take it.
It depends upon the female. If the female is an organizer and Gladys, then maybe not. See, she's very persuasive.
I've already got the inventory.
Okay, I can do it if you don't want to, that's all.
She just needs some dowels. That's all. Oyster.
Yeah. Or you could just give her 10 dowels of oyster. Or 9.
Okay.
I'll get a little sandwich back.
Let nature take its course. Now that these humans from the Moraga Community Garden have learned what this species likes and how to work in a mutually beneficial way with this species, then that part of nature was going to come to the fore in a year to give them food.
Deborah, please. Thank you very much. This is the Vouvray 2007.
That you made yourself?
Yes.
This is
well,
amazing.
with a bunch of folks.
And
Thank
without
you so much.
sulfites, I hear.
Without sulfate, so I can drink the whole thing and not even have a headache. Thank you so much. I mean, this has totally been fun.
This is the banana leaf.
Oh!
And some of the baked bread that's left.
Ah,
Thank you.
excelente. Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, any questions, give me a call, and when it's time to fruit, we can get back together and...
Wait a while, I'll forget everything.
Yeah.
Do what now?
And don't forget to get the handout. I think I gave that to you. All right, we're ready for knocking it over.
Thanks very much.
Got all your drill bits, Bill?
All right. Thanks, Justine, for documenting it.
Bye.
Bye.